Hi everyone, I'm Danielle Byington, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about the poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Now, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, first she is, of course, just Elizabeth Barrett, so we're really talking about the time before that. And then also, if you are a student in my class, we go on to read her husband's work, Robert Browning, from which she gets her other name, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Now, Elizabeth Barrett Browning's childhood is very different than the latter part of her life. So she's the oldest of about a dozen children, and as the Norton Anthology says, even by the time she is 39 years old, she's living as an invalid in the family home. The father, was described as tyrannical, wouldn't allow any of his children to marry. It can be suggested that his attitude, his behavior might have stemmed from the significant loss of wealth the family suffered when abolition happened. And so maybe that framed his attitude as just being overbearing and over controlling. Well, even though she is in those circumstances as a 39-year-old woman, by that time she had already become an accomplished writer. She was very successful and well known in her lifetime. After she is married to Robert Browning, who is also, of course, a well known poet, anthologized as equally as her. She's even more famous than him. There's a joke that at a dinner party once people were referring to him as Mr. Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Um, the way they met, though, was because of her writing. She was allowed to accept a guest in the house who might be someone asking about her writing. They were mutual members of this of a writing circle, and he says he fell in love with her before he ever met her because he fell in love with her poetry. He fell in love with her through her poetry. Now, a lot of her work also, and we are reading the two love poems that she wrote about him. A lot of her longer works, longer poems, are, however, more about her political stances, the things that we covered early on in the Romantic period, with things like Samuel Taylor Coleridge's excerpt from On the Slave Trade. Elizabeth Barrett Browning was also a fervent supporter of abolition. So he fell in love with her ideologies and her as a person, as an artist. And it makes sense, though, because when an artist is making whatever it is that they make, writing, music, visual art, whatever it might be, you are seeing a very vulnerable part of them, of their spirit, who they are. And so it makes sense that he felt like he already knew her to some degree. Now, he confesses his love for her. They end up having a kind of secret courtship, and she runs off and elopes with him in Italy because remember, she's supposed to be forbidden from marriage by the tyrannical father, and he disowned her, never forgave her. She never went back to him. But what happens when I say the latter part of her life is much different than the first half, after they marry and they move to Italy, she regains her health, living in that environment of just, not being allowed to do anything and being caged in more or less. She had a lot of health problems, which is why she is described as being an invalid in the Norton Anthology. But after she gets out of that environment, away from the tyrannical father, and is living in Italy with Robert Browning, her health rebounds. They even have a child together. So you might keep that in mind when you are looking at these poems. In this video, I am going to do Sonnet 43 first. This is probably one of the most well known of her sonnets from the collection Sonnets from the Portuguese. As you see in the Norton Anthology, this is described as acting like translations of love poems. Now, the collection of the 44 sonnets is actually, as she describes, the stages or the evolution of her love developing for Robert Browning. Like, she wasn't in love with him at first the way that he was in love with her, because he had been, kind of falling for her by reading her poetry, like learning a part of her. So she wasn't on that level yet, but she soon learns to trust him, and has the same feelings for him that he has for her. So in this sonnet, we are counting something. We're trying to measure something. So when she says, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height." So we have the depth of something, the breadth, so that's the width, and then the height, so going up. So down and across and up, all these measurements of something that my soul can reach when feeling out of sight for the ends of being and ideal grace. So this is kind of like that expression, "love you to the moon and back." It's a measurement being used to describe like this huge quantity, massive quantity of unconditional love for someone. That's what she's talking about here. "I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need by sun and candlelight." So it's 24/7. So she loves him during daylight, so by sun, and candlelight, so nighttime. "I love thee freely as men strive for right." So it's like it's liberating for her to be in love with him. "I love thee purely as they turn from praise. I love thee with the passion put to use in my old griefs and with my childhood's faith." So when it says my childhood's faith, that's a different kind of faith if we're talking about a belief in anything, whether it's religion or like a type of trust or belief in someone else. There's a sort of innocence attached to it. Maybe even not quite that she is saying she is naive about it, but she has no reason to doubt him. "I love thee with a love I seemed to lose with my lost saints." So it's kind of like a coming full circle kind of attachment. "I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life, and if God choose, I shall better love thee after death." So she's saying it's infinite. These are like wedding. That ending is like wedding vows. To love in sickness and in health, and to the grave, right? So it's familiar. These are all familiar themes. You're seeing it written in a different way. Well, that is all for this video. There will also be a separate video for Sonnet 32 from this collection. Thank you.